is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are live here on BizTalk Radio each and every Sunday. The podcast comes out on Tuesday. You can get the podcast over at iTunes, over at Google Play, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcast content. Show's been going for 12 years. We're now about halfway through our 12th season of the show. So, yes, you can go back if you are really diligent and find show number 1, which was recorded in a bathroom at a Marriott hotel in March of 2005. I wouldn't suggest listening to it. The audio quality was pretty horrid back then. Now we're in a studio, and now we are nationally syndicated. Each week we pick on certain topics to talk about from the standpoint of just things that we find that are interesting, that have an impact on creativity, innovation, and design. In many cases, we have guests that we bring on to the show also to talk about that. Today we have actually 2 guests. This is a first for the show. We typically only have 1 guest at a time, and in this case, we actually have 2 guests. These are the 2 authors of a fairly recent book that came out, which is titled "The Insider's Guide to Decoding Silicon Valley," and so it's authored by Michelle Messina and Jonathan Baer, who I've gotten to know. I got to know Jonathan here a little bit. He and I have had some exchanges. We've been on the phone a couple of times. All 3 of us have a long history in the Valley, and it's kind of one of the common questions you get when you're not in the Valley. Everybody wants to know about the Valley and what's so special about it, and is there some secret sauce that you can go learn, or does it only occur in the Valley? And so they've published this book, this Insider's Guide to Decoding Silicon Valley, which I thought was very enthralling from the standpoint of kind of really getting beyond the facade talk about the Valley and really trying to help people understand and really decode what makes the Valley so special. So first off, Michelle, Jonathan, thanks a lot for taking the time out of your Sunday and joining us here on the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be talking to you on the radio, Phil.
Oh, this is great. So one question right off the bat is, let's take a little bit of time because I want to have the listeners understand a little bit about who you are. So, Michelle, give us a little bit of your background and what kind of brought you to today in writing this book.
Sure. So my name is Michelle Messina. I've been based in Silicon Valley for well over 20 years. Most of my background is working for tech companies, venture-funded and publicly traded companies in sales, marketing, and business development capacities, mostly with enterprise software and hardware. And I've been consulting now in my own consulting company, Explorer International, for about 11 years. And what we do primarily is to help entrepreneurs understand how to be strategic about their market opportunities and how they can grow their business in a more sustainable, repeatable manner. So we do a lot of training, a lot of strategic consulting with early stage companies. And the idea behind the book was really to help entrepreneurs understand the Silicon Valley mindset, the Silicon Valley culture, and then how they can be more successful in taking some of those best practices to other parts of the world.
Perfect. And Jonathan, I like your intro, which you start off with your tagline every time that you're a recovering venture capitalist. So, and it depends on your definition of whether the VCs are the dark side or the light side. But give us a little bit about your background.
Okay, so I am a recovering venture capitalist. I used to invest. I don't anymore. I actually dropped out of the venture business, became founder and CEO of 2 venture-backed companies, both of which had liquidity events. And then sort of almost by accident, was actually asked to do a project for the Economic Development Agency in Northern Ireland, probably 8 or 10 years ago, and I've been working with companies all over the world since. So there is no dark side. The I think that's actually one of the big misunderstandings, that somehow or other VCs are dark and evil, and company CEOs are lily white and perfect. And there are challenges on both sides. And now, having been on both sides, it's much easier to understand and appreciate those different viewpoints, and also understand that actually the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, it's like everything in life, right? It's never quite as black and white as we all would like to make it, as far as the line between. And in my own case, I did 12 startups before number 13. I had an IPO liquidity event. Grew that to 3 billion. So you can't, but the first 12 were challenging at best, and you do get the appreciation of how hard it is to be an entrepreneur. So let's talk about the Silicon Valley specifically. I mean, there's a lot of interest from our listeners and just people around the world wanting to know kind of, what's really so special about the Valley. And in the case of your book, in your table of contents, I think you kind of break it down in kind of some interesting topics, such as, your first chapter really talks about, Silicon Valley matters and why, that Silicon Valley is the most influential ecosystem in the world. And it really came out of by accident. It wasn't a planned development. So talk us a little about that. Maybe bring us up to and give a little bit of the context and history of the Valley and how it all came about into something that now is this iconic, I don't know, we'll call it a brand on a global basis.
So the Valley really, as you say, it was by accident. Silicon Valley, the original name is the Valley of the Heart's Delight. It was orchards. The Stanford University was founded. And early on, Stanford had played a very important role in innovation, and particularly after World War II. There was this tremendous influx, but innovation actually, the first significant innovation, really, as we talked about earlier, Phil, was HP, and that really set the standard for everything that came afterwards. But there was a lot of development. A lot of it was in support of a number of government initiatives. So there was a lot of research money put into innovation, particularly during the space program, so in the late 50s, early 60s. And as a result of that, there was a continual stream of startups and innovation that came about.
Yeah, I mean, the story that I know is Bill Hewlett and David Packard, spinning out, or it was really David Packard was at GE. Bill Hewlett was still doing his master's degree at Stanford when they started HP. But if you look at the early employees at HP, like Art Fong, came out of the military. He was one of the original guys developing radar and brought that expertise. And then you had Varian and all of these kind of iconic companies that all wanted, typically had some connection to Stanford, and all wanted to have their offices somewhat as close as possible to the university. So you ended up with this kind of reinforcing echo chamber, I guess, is the best way to describe it. So, and the
university, Phil, and actually the university, because after World War II, the university was trying to deal with this great influx of students. They actually needed to find ways to generate revenue. So they started what is today the iconic Stanford Office Park, as a way to generate revenue, but also provide space for some of the students, graduate students, alumni who were creating these businesses.
Yeah.
So it was fortuitous.
And again, the first company to move into that park was HP.
Exactly.
Which is interesting because you own the building, but you don't own the land, because Stanford, right, by law, is not allowed to sell any bit of the land. If they sell any bit of the land, the whole university reverts back to the original Stanford family. And so you do these 99-year-long leases. And so the HP headquarters and HP labs and all that are staked out right there on Page Mill, pretty iconic locations. but they actually technically don't own the land that their buildings sit on top of. And everybody around in that area is in the same boat. But again, it's that close affiliation to the university and access to professors and researchers. We're going to take a quick commercial break here. When we come back, we're going to continue on our discussions with Michelle Messina and Jonathan Baer about their book, Decoding Silicon Valley. So stay right there. We're out live on Facebook Live. If you want to get on and ask your questions, go over to killinnovations.com/live, and you can click and join us and ask your questions. We'll be right back. You're listening to Kill Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We're going to continue on in our conversation with Michelle Messina and Jonathan Baer, talking about their book, The Insider's Guide to Decoding Silicon Valley. I want to pick up specifically around this whole issue of what is unique about the Valley. And one of the things I think of as being unique, having done 2 tours of duty myself in the Valley, is really around kind of all the experiences, particularly of the network of people that you engage with and the building of your network. And you have it under one of your chapters in your book around the Silicon Valley you must experience. Can you expand upon that, about what you mean by you must experience?
I'll take that question. The majority of things that happen in Silicon Valley are based on who you know and who you're connected to. So you've got to really build a curated network in Silicon Valley, and most of us, given our backgrounds and the diversity of Silicon Valley, we have very eclectic networks as well. So a lot of times we get out and go to meetups because that's our way of reconnecting with some people that we might not have seen for a while. And it's a great opportunity for us to listen to what they're working on, what their recent projects and activities are, and share a little bit about what we're working on. And usually the conversations with the people that we've known for a while lead to a question of, well, how can I help you? And the other person will say, I'm looking for somebody who's an expert in fintech, specifically around the insurance industry. Do you know anybody? And I might think, oh, yeah, I do. I have a contact I can connect you with. Will you send me an email later on today, and then I'll do an intro for you? So the whole process of getting connected to people is important, but the process of remaining connected with people is even more important. So it's not about having 10,000 contacts in your LinkedIn profile, for example. It's about having maybe 1,000 people that you've met, that you know, that you've talked to, that you understand, people that you can trust, that you have sort of a philosophical alignment on how they do business or what their interests are, things like that. So the curated network is a really important part of how things get done. Yet the other side of things is that when you go to an event or a meetup or a conference, for example, you never know who you're going to run into. And you've got to be prepared for running into somebody you may not have expected to meet, or you were just in the right place at the right time and you had one of those serendipitous sort of happy accidents. And that's why we put such an emphasis on being able to give a 1-minute elevator pitch about what you're doing so that you can effectively connect with people at events. So the whole process of building a network in Silicon Valley is important because everything gets done based on who you know here.
That's exactly it. I mean, in fact, when I came to the Valley my first time in, at 83, I think, 84, the whole point there was is you would go to these meetups, and even today, when I did my second round in the Valley, people tend to be very open and sharing access to the networks. It's you go to these events, you talk to somebody that you meet for the first time at an event, all of a sudden offers up a contact because they know somebody, whether it be in fintech and insurance or some other, and that people who come in from outside the valley find that a little bit shocking because there's also these whole sets.
The bar is surprisingly low here.
It's surprisingly low. Well, in here in Boulder, Colorado, where I'm based out of, Brad Feld, who's the founder of Foundries Fund, has built it into kind of the culture of Boulder. It's called a give first.
Yes.
You help somebody else first before you ever ask help for yourself. And it's through this process. So you just find yourself taking loads and loads of meetings to try to help connect the dots. But what's your guys' take on those consultants though that say, pay me and I'll connect you, versus the natural, get out there and hustle by attending events?
I think the pay me first and I'll connect you is not part of the ethos in Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
It's really more about it takes a village, so to speak, in the sense of it takes an entire community of supporting partners and people, expertise, convergence of events, timing, a lot of different things to make a company successful. And we never know which entrepreneur is going to be most successful. We never know which company is really going to, hit it out of the park and hit a home run, become a unicorn, whatever you want to call it. So part of our culture is really about helping everyone because it's you give first and then you get back, and it's just a constant sort of exchange of value and that sort of thing. So it's very hard for people that say, pay me first and I'll open doors for you, for them to be successful in Silicon Valley, because it's completely contrary to most of the culture, the attitudes, and the behavior here.
Exactly.
But I think it's important that, we believe that consultants should get paid when they do real work. And I think one of the challenges in the Valley is that there's this concept that everything is free or everything should be free. And I think there's a challenge there because very often entrepreneurs really do need help, really need work more than do an email introduction or introduce somebody at a networking event. And I think they're in this open environment, which is terrific, which is in Silicon Valley. Sounds like you have that in Boulder as well, hopefully in other parts of the world. The challenge is that there are missteps that people make, and you have to be careful that you are respectful of those introductions. You don't ask or take more than is appropriate, and that you make sure that you close the loop when people are making introductions, because having that thank you and acknowledgement and closing the loop becomes very, very important to maintain and build your curated network.
Exactly. Part of the challenge being and this happens everywhere in the world where people have kind of this giving attitude, that there is also abuse of that, not lack of recognition for what else has to happen. In my case, if I get asked to do an introduction, I'd like to make sure I at least seeing a pitch from the company so that I can accurately represent to the person I'm introducing to why I think the connection is valuable, not just a random, you can do that through LinkedIn on your own, which is a challenge. We're going to take another quick commercial break, but when we come back, in this case, what I'd ask for you guys to come back or be able to kind of share with the listeners is what are some of the common mistakes that you've seen entrepreneurs make in the Valley, trying to either raise money or get into the right network base. I think we've all seen them all, but I'd like to hear your guys' perspective of maybe the top one or top two most common mistakes entrepreneurs make. So we're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to pick up right where we left off with Michelle Messina and Jonathan Baer talking about their book, The Insider's Guide to Decoding Silicon Valley. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalkRadio.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are speaking today with Michelle Messina and Jonathan Baer, the authors of a new book called The Insider's Guide to Decoding Silicon Valley. And as we were going into the commercial break, I asked Michelle and Jonathan to each take a few minutes and think about what are the most common mistakes you've seen entrepreneurs make in regards to coming into the Valley, or actually entrepreneurs around the world. Mistakes are fairly universal, I'm going to guess. So, Jonathan, why don't you start us off? What are maybe 3 of those most common mistakes you've come across, and what should entrepreneurs do differently? Whoops, looks like we may have lost Jonathan. Are you there, Jonathan?
I'm here.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to touch on 3 things, and I know Michelle probably has an even longer list of common mistakes. Having worked with entrepreneurs in more than 30 countries, and in Silicon Valley, we've sort of seen at least one of everything. So one of the common problems, Phil, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so one of the common problems is that people often try and parachute into Silicon Valley. We see that people coming here trying to network. We can see it when people come here trying to get customers, customer traction. We see it when people are coming here trying to get investment. If you meet somebody and they say, gee, I'd like to set up a coffee, and your response is, well, I'll be back in Silicon Valley in 3 months, doesn't work very well in terms of creating continuity and having people believe that you're really committed to doing business here in Silicon Valley. And so that becomes a real problem. And we encourage people, some companies should relocate to Silicon Valley, others may not want to or need to, but establishing some sort of real presence here really becomes important if you're trying to do business, because otherwise it's harder to do, and there's a different level of commitment on both sides if you're just here for a week and then you're going to be back in 3 or 6 months. So that's one common problem. The other thing we often see is people are focused on finding people often at the wrong level, particularly when they're trying to talk to customers or partners. Michelle and I often get the request, well, gee, we'd like to sit down with Larry and Sergey and review with them our product roadmap and get their feedback. This is a 3-person startup.
So hold on. Do people really ask you that? I mean,
yes.
Nobody asks me for those kinds of introductions.
They do.
That's pretty funny.
And occasionally we're asked instead, can we set up a meeting with Eric Schmidt?
There's your backup.
Right, there's the backup. And of course, it's Monday, and they ask that of us Monday afternoon. And of course, they're only going to be in the Valley through the end of the week. So even if it were appropriate, even if we had Eric, Larry, and Sergey on our speed dial, those guys are busy. Meeting with a 5-person startup is probably the wrong thing to be doing. We get the same thing, senior level people in organizations, when the truth is, for most entrepreneurs, working at the operational level in a company, working at the engineering, product management level is really where they need to be focused, at least initially. Mm-hmm. That's really going to be much more useful to them. So those are 2 of the common mistakes. The third one is people will often say to me, well, you were a venture capitalist, introduce me to a venture capitalist, as though venture capitalists were some sort of caged animal that you would go to a zoo to visit. And perhaps they are. I've never seen any of them in the zoos that I've visited. But in fact, the response I give them is wrong request. You want to meet the right investor. And what you need to be doing is really understanding who it is that really fits for your company, your stage of development, the technology, the markets that you're going after. And then through your curated network, find the path to them. Just being introduced to a random venture capitalist or a random angel investor really isn't going to yield you much. And frankly, most people in the Valley, myself included, are simply not going to do that if we don't think there's a fit. We don't think there's a likelihood that it's going to be productive for both sides. So those are the three common things that I see. I'm sure Michelle has an even longer list.
So Michelle, what are your most common ones?
So I'll just go for three, but John's right. We have done a long analyses of what makes startups really successful here in Silicon Valley and where do they get tripped up. But I think the top three that I'd like to share are the entrepreneurs who are not well prepared to present their company, their business, and their product. So they don't have the basics of good presentation skills down. They're not good storytellers, and they tend to want to tell too much information all at once. Doing pitches, whether they be 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute, demo days, going to TechCrunch, any of these other big events, there's a tremendous amount of presentation skills training that takes place prior to an event. And it's not so much just about the entrepreneur's personal presentation style. It's also two other elements. It's understanding who's in their audience and being, cognizant of their background and expertise so they can share, communicate information that's of value to their audience. And then the third element is really ensuring that if they are using a slide deck, whether it be Prezi or Keynote or whatever, that whatever's on the slide supports what the presenter is saying. So it's a spectator sport here in Silicon Valley, and there's a lot of really excellent presenters, and there's a lot of really crappy presenters as well. So entrepreneurs that fail to learn how to effectively articulate their message, tell a good story, that sort of thing, that's a big mistake that we see, not just in Silicon Valley, but all around the world.
Yep, seen
so
it everywhere.
Communication skills are essential.
Yeah, seen it everywhere. So what's number 5 for you?
I think, let's see, the other element would be about entrepreneurs who come in from other parts of the world. They come into Silicon Valley and they think that whatever worked in their home market is going to work exactly that way here in Silicon Valley or in the US market. So they're not necessarily as open to experimenting and iterating and listening to what the market has to tell them so that they can be more successful in building and growing their business. So there's a certain amount of rigidity in there. There's not as much aptitude towards experimenting and iterating. I think that's another element that we see. And then finally, focusing too much on the technology, the features, all the cool whiz-bang things about their technology, instead of spending time talking about the fact that they're building a business. And this is what their business is about. And yes, technology and product is a component of it, but focusing on the fact that they're building a business that delivers value to the market, and they've got to stay focused on that. So we need entrepreneurs to spend more time on business building, business communication, and less around technology and product focus.
So I think this is actually a great list. So Jonathan, you had parachuting in, really not establishing a beachhead in the Valley. This is not something you can come in and do touch and goes. You really have to commit, trying to find introductions to people at the wrong level. No, I'm not going to introduce you to Sheryl Sandberg. I'm not going to introduce you to Meg Whitman. Intro, just saying that you want an intro to a VC versus really understanding who should be the right person or right fund you should even be engaged with based on their investment profile and what you're looking for. Really not having the skills to present, and I see this all the time. I go to pitch at events in the Valley all the time. I go to pitch at events here in Colorado, and it's quite shocking. And things that worked at home, but they believe that they're going to work here. You got to learn how to listen, and then focusing on the technology, focusing on the features versus not really focusing on the business. Great list of 6. We're going to take another quick commercial break here. When we come back, we're going to wrap up our conversation with Michelle Messina and Jonathan Baer, talking about their book, The Insider's Guide to Decoding in Silicon Valley. So stay right there. We're going to be right back after this quick commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Carpenters have their hammers and saws.
.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are continuing our conversation with Michelle Messina and Jonathan Baer on their book, The Insider's Guide to Decoding Silicon Valley. Now, Jonathan and Michelle, you've sent me the book. I love it. I think it's on the mark. But for our listeners, can you break it down to maybe a couple of lessons that they can use as a takeaway? Now, this doesn't cover everything in the book, but a couple of the key lessons that you think entrepreneurs should focus on from the standpoint of for their own success. So why don't we take one from each? Michelle
Sure.
and Jonathan. So
Yeah.
Michelle, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge that we see is around product market fit. And that means that a company is delivering a product to the market that the market wants. We analyzed a lot of information about why companies fail, as much as we could get our hands on, by the way, because there's not a lot of data out there available on it. But what we did find is the majority of the time companies are failing because they haven't nailed down the product market fit issue. So just sort of 4 quick items under product market fit. Startups identifying a problem in the market and building a product that meets that need is really important. You've got to have enough people in your sort of pool of interested prospects to talk to really figure out and understand at a deep level what the problem really is. So step 1 is identifying the issues. And then the second part is creating and validating. So figure out who you need to go out and talk to that's going to give you enough information about your thought out theory or your theory about the product, and whether or not that's going to meet their needs, to figure out whether or not there really is a market there. The third point is, assessing all that information, refining it, putting it into your product roadmap, before you go back out to the market to figure out if it's something they're going to buy. And you've got to be looking and listening for a lot of patterns in that whole process of dialogue with your market. What are prospective customers saying? What are they saying that's right or wrong with what you're doing? So product market fit is one of the biggest reasons companies stumble and fall.
Great. And Jonathan, what would be one lesson you'd think that the entrepreneurs should take away?
Okay, well, first I want to say one thing, that we see really smart people, great entrepreneurs everywhere around the world. And Silicon Valley does not have the lock on smart people and innovative entrepreneurs and companies. But one of the things that Silicon Valley does particularly well, and is something that people can take and apply elsewhere, is that we take a 360-degree view of a business. It's not only about the technology, it's not only about the product, but what's your business model? Do you have the right team? Which market are you focused on? Do all the pieces fit together in a way that you can build success? And that perspective and understanding financial requirements and how big a business you potentially could create is something that we don't see the discipline. There isn't as much a disciplined approach to that elsewhere in the world, or elsewhere in the country. We see people all the time who have a vision, but one of the challenges with a vision is you've got to then say, so let me tell you the concrete steps that are going to get me to the vision. what are the milestones that I'm going to achieve along the way that show progress towards that vision, that show increase in value, reduction in risk, increased credibility that will get you to your eventual goal. Yes, you can, in theory, can be the next Facebook, but you can't be the next Facebook overnight. So you've got to lay out a plan. It's got to make sense. It's got to be fundable, and it's got to be steps that are achievable. And that's something that we encourage companies and entrepreneurs to do more of. It's a discipline. It's a very useful discipline, and it helps people figure out how to really build a successful business.
Great. So Michelle and Jonathan, as we wrap up here on the show, we got just a couple of minutes left. Where can people find the book, The Insider's Guide to Decoding Silicon Valley? Where is... Oh, Michelle, you got your copy there. I got my copy here.
So the book is Decoding Silicon Valley, The Insider's Guide, is available on our website at decodingsiliconvalley.com. And it's available in softcover, hardcover, Kindle format. It links you directly over to Amazon. So just visit decodingsiliconvalley.com to get a copy of the book. We've got 25 different people that we've interviewed in the book. So there's tremendous amount of value from the startup ecosystem, from successful entrepreneurs, from unsuccessful entrepreneurs, from venture capitalists, service providers, large corporate employees. So we've tried to give a very well-rounded perspective of Silicon Valley. Back to John's point about the 360-degree view of the business, we've tried to provide a 360-degree view of Silicon Valley.
You know, the book really is designed as a really practical guide for entrepreneurs. It turns out lots of other people read the book and find value from it, but it turns out reading the book, entrepreneurs will pick up lots of helpful tips, perspective, a lot of things that will help them be successful as they think about and build their businesses.
So, Michelle, Jonathan, thanks again. We will have links both to decodingsiliconvalley.com. We'll also put up links so you can track both Michelle and Jonathan, so you can keep up with what they're doing on all their social media coordinates. Michelle, Jonathan, thanks again. Really appreciate you taking the time. For next couple of weeks, I'm actually going to be on the road, but we have two great shows that will still be coming out on every week. Talking about innovation leadership is kind of the focus of the next couple of shows. So if you are looking for a leadership role in innovation, that would be a one key show. The other show we talk about is also innovation, not in the technology arena. So you want to check out those next two shows. We're here live on Sunday, so I'll be on the road, but the shows will be going on anyway, so you want to check those out. And we'll get those up and share those out. So real quick, the one favor I would ask is go over to iTunes, give us a rating on the show. We greatly appreciate it. It's one way we get that feedback and hear your thoughts on the show. It also get the word out. So again, thanks so much for taking time out of your Sunday for joining us here on Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. We're carried on 32 stations around the country, and we appreciate you taking the time and joining us. With that, have a great week. Don't let the innovation antibodies get you down, and keep on innovating.
Thank you, Phil.
The opinions you hear on Biz Talk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, Biz Talk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on Biz Talk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about Biz Talk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com. biztalkradio.com.